Welcome everyone. This is Tuesday the 26th. This is also the 100th video chat that we've done, so if this were live television we'd be syndicated. But it's not, so there will be no incredibly rewarding royalties coming our way. Just an incredibly rewarding evening with you. We're tickled to have you here and look forward to the questions that and comments that have been sent to us. We'll start off with those. Please do submit your questions as we go, though, because we might be able to get to a couple of those. Here's somebody who says, I'm struggling with what to do with some information I received about my husband, Sam. I want to know whether sharing this feedback with him is a loving thing to do or not, or if it's my business. Because she's referring to something that I've written, in the past, that other people's mistakes are typically none of our business. She says, my sister and brother-in-law are very easygoing people who are pleasant to be around, and Sam mentions often how he likes them. Recently, when my sister and I were away visiting relatives, he and my brother-in-law went golfing, something they both like. But the day turned into a nightmare for John, my brother-in-law. When they went for dinner afterward, because Sam struck up a conversation with a woman that they met there in the restaurant, whom they'd never met before, and her 18-year-old daughter. Sam just talked with this woman for an hour and a half, listening to all of her problems, and as John said, didn't say another word to John. So you can picture this. These two walk into the restaurant, he meets this perfect stranger of a woman, strikes up a conversation, and spends an hour and a half talking to her, and ignores his dinner companion. Which annoys his dinner companion and also annoys the daughter of the woman. So, John was ready to go after the first 5 minutes. He was tired of this business, but he didn't say anything because he felt trapped. And she says John avoids confrontations like that and didn't say anything. But even if he had, Sam would very likely have just said, oh, no, let's just stay a little while longer. So John was miserable for the whole evening. And then later on, when he went home, he vented to my sister about it, and then kept venting about how Sam is selfish about a lot of things, like when they golf. Little things like, when two guys go golfing, they share a cart. And Sam would drive the cart to his, two guys, they hit a golf ball out on the course, and Sam would drive the cart to where he hit his ball, and then, unbelievable, expect his brother-in-law to just walk to where his ball was. Instead of the courteous thing, which would be to drive his brother-in-law to his ball and then drive the cart and drop him off and then drive the cart over to where his own ball was. And then after golf, Sam, my husband, just made the decision, we're going to blank restaurant without asking John, my brother-in-law, his opinion. So over and over during the evening, he just kept making little, really thoughtless decisions and doing little thoughtless things. And this is not new for Sam. He doesn't ask others what they want. He just directs how things are going to go. And he gets offended if people don't listen to him. My concern is that if Sam drives people away and doesn't even know it, and won't take responsibility for what he does. And then, if people don't invite him to do things, he becomes offended. So he drives them away, and then he wonders why people don't like to be around him. And my brother-in-law, John, because of his personality, he's just going to avoid playing golf with Sam again. So what do? Do I share these observations with Sam, with my husband? And if so, how? And is it my business? I know he desperately wants people to like him, but he doesn't seem to spend any effort thinking about what they might want or need. The problem is he gets very defensive. So your question is brilliant. Because I often say never tell your partner anything that they do wrong unless you can answer the 4 questions. Is it my business? Does it really matter? Can I tell them in a loving way, and can they hear it? So, first one, is it my business? Well, is it your business how your husband interacts with your brother-in-law? Not really. It's, that's their affair. Except, it'd be easy to say not really. Because, if they have a lousy time playing golf, what's that to you? Except for this. He's your husband. He's the other half of you. He's your soulmate. He's your greatest love on the planet. He's the person you care about, or ought to, more than anybody else. And gosh, if you really love him, wouldn't you want him to be happy? And what he's doing is not making him happy. So, is it your business? Gosh, if you don't tell him what he's doing, what other person on the face of the earth will? Probably nobody. Your brother-in-law's not going to do it. The lady at the restaurant's not going to do it. Her daughter's not going to do it. No person randomly on the street's going to do it. If you don't tell him, he doesn't stand a chance. So, second question. So, is it your business? Yeah, it is. He's your partner. Your partner. Second. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. He's ruining his emotional and spiritual life by driving people away, by being selfish. What you're describing here isn't complicated. He's just being a really selfish human being. He doesn't think about other people. All these little things that you're describing here, I know lots of people like this. He just takes over and does what he wants. So, does it matter? Yeah. You can't be happy living like this. It can't be done. You can get control of things. You can get praised. You can get power. You can get safety. You can get all manner of imitation love. But happiness, not a chance. So, yeah, it matters. Can you tell him in an unconditionally loving way? Only you can answer that. From what you've written here, I'm not hearing any irritation. You would have to just be very careful to talk to somebody about this beforehand. Make sure that you feel completely filled up before you go to talk to him. Now, this last part, this is the tough one. Can he hear this? I don't know. Because what you're describing here isn't like an issue. It's not like a little sidelight. It's not like, everything else in his life is happy, but, he eats ice cream on the living room sofa and consistently drips it on the rug. This isn't like some little thing he does that's just like a little blemish in his life. This is the way he lives his life, which is selfishly. And I'm just guessing that it affects you on quite a number of occasions too. So, can he hear it? There's really only one way to find out, huh? You haven't got much to lose. As it is now, living selfishly, there's no way for him to be feeling loved. There's no way for him to be feeling loving or responsible. And without feeling loved, loving, and responsible, how could he possibly be feeling genuinely happy? So you got nothing to lose. You can just sit down with him and say, let me describe to you some scenarios. And make it really clear to him that you're telling him, I'm not asking you to change your behavior. You need to say that right up front. So, I'm not asking you to change. I'm not annoyed by this behavior. But let me describe what you're doing. And it's not a debate. You don't say, so do you see how you say, when you do this, you're not thinking about this person's behavior or this person's feelings or what this person wants. And it really bothers that person. So giving the example of John, and you need to say, you can go and talk to John about this later if you want to, but it will only offend him. It will only cause hard feelings. So don't turn this into a thing of contention. I'm trying to teach you this so that you can see how it's affecting other people and you. Don't go try to don't go fuss at John about this. I heard about this secondhand, but I just need to tell you that when you make decisions and don't think about other people, it has a really harmful effect on them and on you, because you end up feeling alone, you end up feeling unloved, you couldn't possibly be feeling loving, you don't feel responsible for the choices that you make, and therefore the end result is you don't feel happy. And that's why I'm telling you this. Not to change your behavior. I'm not telling you this so you'll treat John differently. I'm not doing this for John. I'm doing this for you. And then you might give him a couple of other examples, because I'll bet you can think of 100 off the tip of your tongue. Just a couple, don't overwhelm him, and say, if you'd like, if you're interested, I will help point out to you when you do this. Because my guess is you're mostly unaware when you do. Most people that I know who are selfish like this consistently really don't realize it. It's really the way they live. And it comes from being so empty, from having been so starved, usually from the time they were small children, that if you've been starved, if you're starving to death, what do you think of? You. If you're drowning and you're gasping for your last breath of air, who are you thinking of? You. If you've got a truck running over your foot and you're in exquisite pain, who do you think of? You. That's where selfishness comes from, is from pain and emptiness and fear. So nobody's accusing him of anything, telling him he's being a bad person, and I would suggest telling him that. And say you're only interested in his happiness. These are just observations to help. And if he becomes extraordinarily defensive and says, no, I don't, and I did, then you say, my mistake. I was just sharing with you some observations that I thought might be helpful, that you might be able to use them to become happier. And if you don't find them useful, then I have no need whatever to push this subject. And you drop it. And that's how you can tell whether you're doing it lovingly. If you keep pushing it, then it's not out of love. But what have you got to lose by bringing it up? If you bring it up and he listens, gosh, you might save literally his emotional life. You might pull him out of the ocean. If he doesn't listen, you go right back to what you had before, and all you've lost is an uncomfortable 20 minutes. Maybe. If he blows up early, it might be an uncomfortable 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Big deal. Give it a shot. So yeah, you can bring it up. Here's I was talking to a woman at a seminar, and she was telling me about her son who had pretty much taken over her home. He's like 14 years old, and this woman has been so frightened all of her life that she has just no idea how to be loving, no idea how to feel loved, and no idea how to say no to a child. And here's a boy who's lived back and forth between her house and her ex-husband's home, and pretty miserable boy. And now he's living with her. And this 14-year-old boy has just taken over the home. Literally runs the house at 14. Tells her what to do, curses at her, screams at her, threatens her physically, uses vile language at her, as in loudly and in her face, threatens her, yells at her, uses vile language with her young daughter, and asked me what I thought she should do. Other than shooting him, I suggested that she needed to put a stop to his behavior immediately. A child who at 14 is that out of control really needs to feel like somebody cares about him enough to tell him what rules are. And it's loving to say no. It's loving to say no. We benefit, we're happy when we're loved, loving, and responsible. And we can't feel responsible, nor can we be loving in the absence of obedience to rules or laws and caring about other people, which means being responsible and following rules and order and laws. And so I suggested to her that she say to him, you know, if you're angry, I understand. You get to be angry, you get to be resentful, you do. But you don't get to yell and scream. You don't get to frighten me. You don't get to frighten my daughter, your sister. You don't get to punch holes in walls. And so if you do any of those things, here are the consequences. And we went through a list of prescribed consequences. Repairing holes in walls. Foregoing some of the privileges that he enjoys if he screams or uses vile language. And if it continues, then he would have to go back and live with his father, which he just detested. And if it continued enough, then he'd get to go and live in jail, which is where everybody else gets to go and live if they're threatening to other people. If I, as an adult, come into your house and threaten you and punch a hole in your wall and use vile language, I go to jail. And the same rules need to apply to young men when they behave that way in their homes. So she did that. And she went home and she writes and tells me this. She says, the day after the conference, my son, through one of his violent escapades, put his fist and his head through the wall. Now, I do admire him at least putting his head through the wall, because at least that's taking some responsibility for his behavior. If you're going to hurt something, at least hurt your own head. She said, I had a bit of courage and told him that he had to go live with his dad until he was ready to have a talk about his behavior and rules at my home. I have not seen or heard from him until just now. I think my estimation is that would have been something like 3 to 4 weeks. And now he wants to talk tomorrow. I have more courage now and can do what is necessary in talking to him without being tearful. Good for you. So, what do I say? I need advice about what to say to him. And my daughter, by the way, says that since I threw him out of the house and sent him to his dad's house, that he's been way nicer to her. So, she says, thanks for the advice. Kids really don't like being out of control. They really don't want to rule their own completely chaotic universe. They really want a safer universe where there are rules. Which of us would like to live in a rule where the law of gravity applied periodically? It would be terrifying, wouldn't it, if gravity worked occasionally? Now, there are times, I realize, that when we are, for example, driving our cars off a cliff, when we would wish that gravity could be suspended, but it would be way worse if gravity only worked intermittently. We actually rely on it to keep our feet on the ground. And interestingly, it works that way with kids. Kids need there to be rules of relationships and love and behavior. Those rules make them feel safe. And when there are no rules, it's a crazy, fearful world for them to live in. And this boy's been living in such a world. So, when you get together with him, first emphasize how much you care about him. And tell him that you've really screwed up prior to now in not being more vocal in 2 ways. That you haven't told him enough that you care about him, and that you have not been consistent in expressing to him the guidelines that need to be kept, and that you haven't taught him how to live. It's not just about restricting a child. We think that raising children is all about restricting. Don't do this and don't. You also haven't taught him how to live. Do you see? It's not just that you haven't given him consequences and told him what not to do. You haven't taught this boy how to behave. You haven't told him how to be a boy. You haven't told him how to interact with people. You haven't taught him how to be loving toward people. And I realize that in great part, It's because you didn't know how to live. I mean, for much of your life, you've been quite a mess, because I know a fair bit about you. You didn't know how to do any better. And tell him that. Say, I really screwed up with you, sweetie. And I just didn't know any better. So tell him you love him, and that part of loving him is that you want him to be happy. And people cannot be happy without being responsible. It can't happen. Irresponsible people are never happy. Oh, sure, they can have a good time. Yes, they can always go out and drink and have sex and buy toys, and they can have fun. But in the end, it always comes crashing down around their ears. They can't be genuinely happy. And you're willing to let him make all kinds of mistakes while he lives with you. Oh, we all make lots of mistakes. But he has to be responsible for the mistakes that he makes, just like all the rest of us are. You're not picking on him. When you make mistakes, emphasize this to him. You have to be responsible for them. If you don't show up at work, there are consequences that you have to suffer. If you drive too fast on the highway, they pull you over and they give you a ticket. In every aspect of life, you are held responsible for your mistakes. And he has to be too. And if you don't teach him that here at home, the world will teach him that. And the world will teach him that with an iron fist and a club and a hammer and with jail bars. No kidding. So it's easier to learn it at home. So teach him the simple rules that you require him to live by, and then teach him what the consequences of his behavior will be if he breaks the rules. Simple. You keep the rules, it's going to be fun. You don't keep the rules, here are the consequences of breaking them. We've gone over some of those. And if he agrees to that, he'll like it. And that's how uncomplicated it is. That's how uncomplicated life is for the rest of us. As long as we go by the rules, gosh, you pretty much get to do what you want. You don't, then, you pay. So keep it simple with him, but emphasize how much you love him. I suggest that those of you who haven't signed up for the newsletter, please do. We got a new feature in the newsletter called Real Love Stories, and we're going to start posting stories from people who are writing in and telling us about either their whole lives or telling us about just little events in their lives where, because they had learned about real love or because they had felt loved in a given moment, how things changed for them. And we just had a little story sent in to us just the other day from a lady whose husband is serving in the military in Afghanistan, I believe, and how her marriage has completely changed because she picked up the Real Love book somewhere and had it for, a couple years, I guess, before she read it, and how she and her husband now are just having a delightful relationship. So I was going to read that here, but it's coming out to you in your newsletter like it's being mailed out right now. So it may be coming in your electronic door as we speak. I received this from a woman whose husband, let's see here. Actually, let me go do a question live. I was on a conference call last night, and I spoke to a man named Ryan. I guess it's too late to take out his name now, isn't it? Since I'm reading it. And he was talking about how he'd broken up with his girlfriend. And he was talking about how he regretted that he'd broken up and how he was, in pain from having broken up with her. And he said, I have to ask again because I honestly can't remember. Is it wrong for me to hope that my girlfriend and I get back together again one day? I know that I have to learn more about real love before a relationship could ever work. But is it wrong to hope that we can get back together one day? I want to be with her again because after seeing things clearly, I realized that she truly did love me unconditionally. My next question is, why was I unhappy still even though she loved me unconditionally? I thought that when we receive unconditional love, it fills up that emptiness within ourselves. Again, I can honestly say that she loved me unconditionally. She saw me go through a foreclosure, saw me on the brink of bankruptcy, saw me lose my car, took me into her home, let me use her car, never charged me a dime for rent, and above all, never changed the way that she loved me. So, this is hard stuff to hear. So, kind of, if you're not wearing a seatbelt, get one. You really don't have the slightest idea whether she was loving you unconditionally. You think you do, but you really don't. Hard to hear, like I say, but it's kind of like this. Imagine that you've never played the piano. Never played. And you hear somebody play a piece, and you say, wow, they really played that well. If you've never heard the piano played before, you wouldn't have the slightest idea whether that piece was played well or not. You really wouldn't. No clue. Not until you've played for a very long time would you even have the ability to judge whether a piece was played well. You simply wouldn't have the ear. And the same is true with real love. In the beginning, when we have not had sufficient unconditional love in our lives, when we are sufficiently empty and alone ourselves and fearful, as you have been, we couldn't judge unconditional love if it came and sat on our heads. We may think that that's what it was looking back, but usually we don't have the ability to judge it. So, like you said, she saw you lose your car, saw you on the brink of bankruptcy, took you into her home. But see, I've heard exactly those same descriptions, exactly applied to somebody who is just simply severely codependent. Somebody who will allow whoever they're living with to do any number of things, and they'll let them continue to do those things. They'll let them continue to screw up, and they'll stay with them just because they need somebody to be with them. Now, am I saying that your girlfriend was not unconditionally loving? I'm not. No, I'm not. So don't hear me judging your girlfriend. I'm not doing that. All I'm saying is this. You're asking, is it wrong for you to want to be back with her? All I'm saying is, at this point, what you need to focus on is just getting more unconditional love for you. Period. From people that there's no possibility that you could be in an exclusive relationship with. In other words, for whom you would feel no possibility of sexual attraction. And as you fill up with more unconditional love, and you become more of a whole and complete and loved and fulfilled and happy person, then rather than hoping you can get back with any one person, what will happen is you will attract into your life an unconditionally loving partner. Now, it might be your former girlfriend. But if you go back out into the world with the notion that it needs to be her, you may very well pass up the person who would be a far better partner for you than her. Do you see? Our expectations, our demands in life very often screw up what's the best thing in life for us. So it's far better for you just to get filled up and feel unconditionally loved, and then put yourself back out there and simply tell the truth about yourself to as many people as possible. Once you get loved enough, You may, at some point, after you feel loved enough, and I mean like after a year, I'm not kidding, not after like a few months, you may contact her again and say, let's get together sometime. If she says no, let it go. If she says sure, great, then get together with her and just tell the truth about yourself a little bit and see how it goes. But do not be attached to the outcome. Don't be tied to a thing like that. The less attached we are to an outcome, the greater the results are. If I attach myself that it's got to be her, what if she's a quarter of the wonderful results that I could get? Do you see what I'm saying? What if the woman that you should be with is 10 times what this woman is that you just left? Then you'd be pretty silly to be attached to her, wouldn't you? So, is it wrong for you to hope that you and she could get back together? Well, it's not wrong, but you may be shortchanging yourself. Because at this point, you know so little about what it really feels like to be unconditionally loved that you have no clue whether she's even close to what you might eventually be capable of finding. So, lighten up there, fella. Just get more unconditional love in your life and you'll be prepared for spectacular things. That's all I'm saying. I was talking to a woman, or have been for the last several weeks, just a little bit here and there, by internet and by phone, to a woman whose husband, and in fact I've mentioned her here on the video chat, I think once or twice, to a woman whose husband has been addicted to porn for like ever, 18 years, that seems like a long time, and who has been going to therapy and who had been prescribed an ongoing set of addiction meetings, for his porn addiction, and who had been increasingly verbally abusive toward her and exceptionally irresponsible, not paying the bills at home and calling her foul names in front of their child and avoiding conversations with her and so on, which are all very common behaviors among addicts of any kind, whether you're addicted to porn or gambling or shopping or drugs, or it doesn't really matter. And she wrote and said this. She said, I was listening to the archived chat from November 4 and wanted to inquire about how to remedy my issues. She said, I listened to your recommendation and I've been continuing to try to keep, we'll call him Fred, to try to make him accountable for his actions. But it's just not working because I had recommended to her what he does is he avoids any kind of responsibility. So when she tries to talk to him, he just walks in the next room or pretends to be asleep, for example. Imagine an adult man in his 30s and you try to talk to him about an issue and he just goes like this and pretends that he's asleep. Very mature. Huh? So she says the guy's very smart and cunning, although it seems to me like tilting your head over and pretending to be asleep isn't all that cunning, but I don't know. And she said, yes, it intimidates me because he has a response to everything. I don't think I'm even doing what you suggested correctly, which, come on, sweetie. I mean, when you've been living in you've been living in a really sick environment for all these years you've been married to him. Now, here's the crazy thing. And you've been accepting it. I mean, this is like nuts because it's what you've had from the beginning. And because nobody's ever told you that it's insane, you've just accepted it and gone, well, okay, I guess I just have to cope. And here's your husband, because all your life you figured, you'd get married and your husband would be your partner and whatever your husband told you would be right because you've told me that that's what you believed. And a lot of people think that. A lot of women think that. A lot of husbands think that of their wives. So when your husband comes along and tells you, well, this is what married life is supposed to look like, you went, well, okay, you've just accepted this as normal married life. It's not. Well, it may be average married life, well, a little below average in this case, but it's insane. It's completely unloving. It's not to be tolerated. Something has to be done. But you've gotten used to it. And so when you say that you don't think you're doing what I suggested correctly, well, of course you're not. You've lived in crazy land all these years, and then I've come along and suggested, all right, why don't you do things a little differently? Well, of course you're going to make changes gradually and make mistakes. Of course you are. So when he walks away from a situation, I follow him and I tell him that he needs to continue addressing this situation even though it's uncomfortable. And that is important because, see, all these years, what he thinks is that if he acts like a victim and like a baby and just goes, well, I just don't want to talk about it, and walks in the next room, he thinks that he'll intimidate you and you'll walk away and it'll be over with. And it's always worked. So what does he do? He keeps doing it. Well, how are you going to get him to quit that? People will always continue a behavior as long as it gets them the desired results. So you have to now convince him that walking away and acting like a, 4-year-old will no longer be productive. Now the trick is to continue to hold him responsible and accountable without being witchy about it, and without being angry, and without being naggy. See? Just being accountable. So that when he says, well, I don't want to talk about it, you say, well, I understand that. I understand that you don't, but we really have to. When he says, well, I don't want to, for example, he doesn't go to his addiction meetings. And you say, he didn't attend 4 out of his last 8 addiction meetings. Well, that's a problem. When guys start missing their addiction meetings, that means that they are either back to using or they're about to use. That's not like a question. That's what it means. And so you have to sit down with him and say, so we need to talk about this. And when he says, well, I don't want to talk about it, and then what he says is, it's none of your business. Yeah, actually it is. Because when addicts are using, it makes a marriage not difficult. It makes a marriage impossible. Because addicts are now married to their addiction. You can't do both. You can't be married and be an addict at the same time. Can't be done. So, it's your business. So you follow him. If that means you have to follow him from room to room and say, we really do need to talk about this, then that's what you need to do. Because he needs to be convinced that it will be talked about, even if he goes to the next room, so that he understands going to the next room isn't going to get him out of the discussion. Otherwise, he'll keep walking into the next room. You continue. I'm going to keep bringing it up till it's discussed, and then you say it's important for our kids to learn that we follow through with one another. No, I'd leave that out. He really doesn't care that he's going to be an example for your kids. Addicts have a hard time staying sober just so that they'll be alive. So that they'll be an example for their kids is way down on the priority list. You know, that's kind of like telling them if you don't stay sober, then the kids in the Sudan will starve. They don't really care. I've been at it for 4 days trying to get him to acknowledge his mistake in missing 12-step meetings, and I'm not sure where I'm getting caught up. The other night I followed him into our room while he was trying to go to sleep, which of course he does a lot when I'm trying to talk to him, and pointed out that his missing a meeting was a mistake and asked if he recognized that. He just ignored me. So your question is, do I keep talking? Yes, you do. And if necessary, get down right next to his face and say, Fred, did you hear what I just said? So I'm going to sit here and wait for an answer. And if you need to, just reach over and touch him on the shoulder and say, Fred, you're not 4 anymore. We need to talk about this. This is something that's destroying our family, and we can talk about it now, or I can wait for 30 seconds and talk about it, but I'm not going to go away. So we can make this a long, drawn-out process that will go on all night long, or if you want to go to sleep, see, it's pay me now or pay me later. We can do this all night long, or you can talk about it right now, and then you can go to sleep in 3 minutes. It would be much faster if we talked about it now. See the reward? See, that's something that a 4-year-old understands. If you talk now, it's faster. That will help him. So, and I'm not making fun of him. I'm telling you, at his level of emotional maturity, you have to say, it will be faster if you do this now. If you keep avoiding me, it just goes on longer and longer. It's kind of like telling a kid, if you clean your room now, then you get to have your pie sooner. So then he covered his face with his pillow. Forgive me, it's just sounding so mature. He walked into the other room and back into the bedroom, trying to get me to leave him alone. He finally ended up sitting on the other side of the door of our room so I couldn't get in. Since our room is next to the baby's room, I didn't want to wake him. So I told him I'd be back in 10 minutes. I came back 10 minutes later, and he'd barricaded himself in the room with a large, heavy dresser. He's going to pull out a squirt gun in a minute. So I pounded on the door and eventually shoved my way in and turned on the light to find him sitting up yawning like he didn't know what was going on. As I'm typing this, I'm realizing how immature he really is. No kidding. And I'm kind of smiling because it's taken you all this time to realize that you're living with a 4-year-old. You have accepted this to this point. I continued on with the issue and he just ignored me. When this happens, ignoring, do I just continue talking? Well, one of the things that you might be not doing is that when you talk, you need to say a sentence and then wait for him to respond. The more you go on lecturing, the more they tune out. So you say a sentence and say, do you understand what I just said? And then you say, so we can do this the long way or the short way. If you respond, then this is over. Or I can just sit here and wait, and you get up closer and closer to him so that it's harder and harder for him to ignore you. If necessary, with your, now listen to me, your nose touching his nose. So, Fred, did you hear what I just said? Our family is being destroyed, and one of the next steps is that you won't have a family and you will be alone. Did you hear what I just said? I'm not kidding. So you can keep acting like you're 4 and doing what you're doing now and not paying attention to me. But see, there's a consequence for every choice you make. What you're doing now is deciding that you will not be the husband, but you will be the child. And see, I can't continue to live forever with the child. So are you going to respond to me, or are you going to continue to behave like this? There is a price to be paid for every action. What are you going to do? So you need to talk to him very directly and clearly about what the choices that he's making. When he barricades himself in, should I force my way in or give him a break? Oh, I guess for a few minutes. The dresser is still in front of the doorway, and he refuses to remove it until I agree to not try to talk to him when he's going to sleep. Just move the dresser yourself. Take the drawers out first. It's lighter. It's just a clue. Is it inappropriate to use exchanges as a means to get him to talk to me? In other words, I won't do something for him like his laundry until he discusses the issue. No. Just keep talking to him until he talks. But you have to keep remembering that you can't be angry because he can't hear that. Like I say, he's a child. And the moment you become angry at him, he will withdraw from you to the moon. And you can't skip the part of loving him, which means that when you're not having these direct discussions, you can't avoid him. So there still has to be the touching him and doing nice things for him and looking him in the eye and being overtly loving to him all the time. And if he's as withdrawn as it sounds here, you may even consider strongly saying to him that he consider going to see a physician to be at least evaluated for depression. And if necessary, set up an appointment for him. If necessary, calling his work and saying that he needs a sick day, and then telling him, I'm going to schedule a day off for you at work, I'm going to schedule a doctor's appointment, and I'm going to go in with you to see the doctor. Never schedule an appointment for somebody who is emotionally impaired for an evaluation for depression and then send them in by themselves to give the history. Depression is a diagnosis made based on history. And people who are depressed, when you ask them, how are you doing? Half of them or more will say to the doctor, I'm okay. Well, so what kind of diagnosis do you think they're going to get? That they're okay. So you need to go in and describe how they're doing at home, because he'll very likely lie about it. So he's in kind of a big problem here, and you're going to have to help him. And it's because he's impaired both emotionally and mentally here that you're going to have to intrude and help him. Most of the time we don't intrude on other people's problems. But he's having problems that he cannot handle by himself. So you will have to. Next letter. About a year ago, a small but treasured family heirloom was missing. Recently, my daughter, age 11, came to me crying, saying that she threw the item out in the trash one time when she got angry at me. I guess that was about a year ago. She cried for an entire evening, saying how sorry she was and can I forgive her, and she wanted to replace the item. In fact, I found her looking for a replacement on eBay. I told her that I loved her and that I felt bad and that how badly she felt was the natural consequence for what she did. Just, not a terrible idea. But it didn't end there. A few months ago, she got mad at me and ransacked my jewelry box, throwing my jewelry box on the ground and getting the jewelry all knotted up because she was mad at me for some other minor thing. I don't even know what. Again, the tears and the apologies came later. So last night, on my birthday, we went out to dinner, and my daughter verbally attacked me for the whole dinner. I don't know where the anger came from, except maybe because we didn't buy the birthday cake she wanted and decided to eat dessert at a restaurant instead. When we got home, the tears started, and she's crying, I ruined your birthday, can you forgive me? And so on. I understand that she isn't feeling loved, otherwise she wouldn't do this, and she had to learn this behavior from someone. So how does a parent respond to this while also applying real love principles? She's being brought up with real love, and her life is much different from the lives of her friends, and most of the time she's happy. And of her own accord, she spends lots of time with me and her dad. I want to get this right, and I have mixed feelings, about thinking about that natural consequences. That the natural consequence is simply how she is feeling bad about what she's done. But if this escalates as she gets older, what's it going to be like? She gets into more serious things. So think about this in the overall picture of this kid's life. She's 11 years old. I've known you for a while, and she's only known consistent real love in her life for the last, if I'm wrong a little bit, forgive me, but the last year or so. So in the really formative years of this kid's life, she grew up in a home that was not especially unconditionally loving. She has seen screaming and yelling, and she has seen very unkind interchanges between her parents. And she's lived in a world where it was frightening, where love was very undependable, like hardly there at all. And that's a very scary place for a kid. So now, love is more dependable. She's getting a lot more love from you and from her dad. But she may not entirely trust that. And she goes to school, and at school I can promise you she doesn't get dependably loved by her peers or by her parents. There are probably still moments at home, when you or your husband or whatever, but somebody gives her little looks of disappointment, or she simply perceives them. But she's not entirely certain that she's loved. Or simply things don't go her way, and she takes that as that she's not loved, even if you are loving her. And so then she goes right back to in her mind to the days when things were chaotic and awful. So then she reacts with these little fits where she, throws your heirlooms in the trash and ransacks your jewelry box and attacks you at dinner. So what do? Well, the first time that she did that, you just said, oh, look, you feel bad. That's just the natural consequence, which frankly I think is just brilliant. And then she went through your jewelry box. Well, when a kid sort of starts to repeat a behavior, you wonder if just feeling bad is probably not enough of a consequence, And then you start to say to a kid, well, all right, so what are we going to do so that you remember this better the next time? And if a kid ransacked my jewelry box, then I'd be saying, well, all right, so you clean that up, and then why don't you do this? Why don't you clean it all up, make the jewelry box look exactly like it looked before? Don't you do a thing as the adult. You have her make that jewelry box look exactly like it looked. And then you say, so then why don't you write a 750-page paper on what you were feeling when you did that and how you could have done that differently. How you could have expressed your feelings differently. And then why don't you bring it to me and we'll talk about what you wrote. She will remember that for quite some time. The calm way that you dealt with it, the fact that she had to write something about it, that she had to actually think through it in her head, write it down, possibly edit it. It will be a memorable event, a significant consequence. No kidding. Turn it into something, always something that they learn from. Then she attacked you, like you said, at the dinner table, at your dinner. You said, my daughter verbally attacked me for the whole dinner. Oh, as soon as you said that, it was like alarms went off in my head. I'm going, excuse me, the whole dinner? You're kidding me. At the first negative comment that a child makes like that, you immediately put down your fork. You pull the slab of ribs out of your mouth, and because that's what we do in the South, we put the whole slab of ribs in our mouth at a time. You put it down, and you say, sweetie, what was that about? You don't defend yourself. You don't say, stop it. You say, so what was that about? Because, wow, clearly you're upset about something. So you just put your hand on your chin and rest it and say, I'm dying to hear what that was about, because, whoa, that sure seemed to come out of nowhere. And whatever it was she was attacking, that's not the subject. The subject is she's mad at you. So you say, so what are you mad about? And you help her figure it out. Because what she needs in that moment is for somebody to really listen to her. But for her to attack you all dinner long, if she's attacking you all dinner long, that means you weren't listening to her all dinner long. See what I'm saying? So you stop it. You stop it by listening. And I think that you'll just find that just way more helpful. What do you need, kid, when somebody attacks you? Clearly you need something or you wouldn't be talking like this. Here's somebody who says, my partner is scared a lot and talks about the knots in his stomach and more. Currently, one of his coworkers is having rage attacks at work, and then after the rage attacks, he makes nice with everyone at work. You've known people like this, you know. They blow up, and then afterward they act like nothing happened. Well, then when my partner comes home, I listen to this, and I'm waiting for my own clarity to arrive so that I can reach for some version of 8, listening. I've suggested that this might be an opportunity for him to read Real Love in the Workplace. Maybe. My goal in this process is to stay present. I don't want to rescue him, and I don't really know what to say. So tonight there will be a nice dinner ready when he comes home, but I don't want to reinforce the fear either. Not my job, I guess. He thinks his fear is real, and I've certainly added to that in our relationship. I've added to the evidence that it is. So I'm making calls, and I'm doing my homework. I'm working on our relationship. Do you have any other suggestions? Sure. Actually, what you're doing is really very nice. Because you're not doing stupid things like, well, you shouldn't be afraid, or you should do this, or you shouldn't do that. But just a couple of things, just as I'm reading what you're saying. It really helps people when they're afraid, for one thing, to do what you're doing already, and that is not to be afraid with them. People come in and they say, I'm all upset that somebody at work is doing this, and the first thing most people do is jump right on the field of death with them and go, oh, how could they act like that? Oh, that's so terrible. And then, of course, everybody's on the field of death swinging battle axes and swords, and everybody dies. And you're not doing that. This is just wonderful. So, way to go. But when people are afraid, it's often very helpful to help them see what they're afraid of. Because once people get enough into fear, they don't even know what they're afraid of. So you might say to him, Fred, so when your coworker, Max the Terrible, is raging, exactly what are you afraid is going to happen? What are you afraid is going to happen to you? And very often, they can't tell you. So ask him, what's the worst thing that could happen when he's raging? What's the worst thing that could happen? Make him say it. People get so afraid they don't even know how to vocalize what they could be afraid of. Is he going to pull a gun and kill you? No, probably not. So what are you afraid of? Well, almost invariably what people are afraid of when people are raging is what? That they will vent their rage on them. And when somebody is venting their rage on you, you might even enact it for him, just for a second. So you say, so when Max is venting his rage on you, what are you hearing? What are you hearing about you? Help him. And it's usually something like, just so you know, and help him so he can say it. It's usually something like, well, I'm hearing that I'm a worthless person, that I'm scum, that I'm weak, and then once he can verbalize what he's most afraid of, then you help him and say, so are you scum? Are you worthless? Are you weak? Help him see whether that's true. And whether when he's home there with you, if he feels sufficiently unconditionally loved by you, whether those things are true. And whether it would make a difference if your discussion right there with him, while he felt unconditionally loved by you, if he could carry that feeling of being loved by you to work, and if he could carry that memory of that feeling loved with him and have it in his head when that person was raging, ask him if he could see how that would make a huge difference when that person was raging at him. Because the person who's raging is what? A true threat? No. A 4-year-old brat who's telling a lie to everybody in the room. And really the only thing that the 4-year-old is screaming at everybody is what? He's not saying anything about anybody in the room. What he's saying is, I don't feel loved. That's all he's saying. And you can help your partner see that. So what you're really going to help your partner see is that the raging coworker isn't saying anything about your partner. What he's really screaming is, I'm empty and afraid. And if your partner can see that, then this raging coworker instantly becomes zero threat. So you could become a huge help to your partner. It all depends on whether your partner's willing to participate in this kind of discussion with you. If he is, it could be way cool. So, simply brilliant questions. Please send the ones that you didn't get answered tonight to me at greg@reallove.com. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. It will be a delight. And in the meantime, remember that it's always about real love. See you then.